Welcome to HortTube. My name is Putnam. This video is all about heat stress in the garden. This summer of 2023 has been particularly tough on many plants, and I've been riding through some nurseries over the last couple days, and even the nurserymen have really struggled. I mean, it is incredible what this summer's actually, they haven't been, in many cases, been able to water enough. They've had fertilizer in the containers. They use prills to fertilize these plants. Here's an example. I think you can see right here in the palm of my hand, these three little prills, they just rolled off my hand. But those prills are, the fertilizer is encapsulated inside that prill, and it's gotten so hot at times it's actually melted the casing on some of the prills and dumped the fertilizer. They've had their pHs all over the place, their ECs or their salt. You can pour water through these containers and basically measure the amount of salts that are in there. They're all over the place. Everything is all over the place, and growers have really struggled to produce plants. And in a time when plants are already short, there's going to be some recovery needed. A couple of the nurseries I've been to, we've had a few cooler nights. I'm down in the Gulf area right now. I'm normally in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is Zone 7B. I'm down here in 8B right now, and they've had a few cooler nights, and some of the plants are flushing now. They're coming back out of what was terrible stress. You guys, I think, will see that in your gardens as well, on things that have thinned and kind of gone into a dormancy. A lot of these plants want to go into what is a summer dormancy, really. Plants grow best when the temperature is between about 59 and 86, okay? And that's not all plants, but most plants. That's kind of the sweet spot for growth. If you can keep the temperature in there, most plants will grow and thrive. But once you get over 90, the plants want to kind of slow down, go into a bit of a dormancy. Once we go over 100, the plants really, a lot of plants lose their defenses altogether. Outside of plants that have evolved in those types of spaces, the plants really lose the ability to fend themselves easily. So plant growth slows, and you can begin to see some evidence that the plant is under stress. And some of those, and what that stress is really is that photosynthesis is being hampered. Okay, the plant it struggles to produce energy, produce sugars from the sun's energy anymore. And once that happens, all the other chemical processes in the plant really start to struggle. And what you can get, on things like tomatoes, you'll get blossom end rot. You can get, plants wilting. Obviously, they're just wilting down like this, right here, and they're telling you, please water me. You'll get yellowing, off-colored plants, and a lot of this depends on what types of plants they are. They're going to respond differently, to 103 degrees and abnormally dry conditions differently. Some are going to yellow, some are going to just wilt, some are going to thin some leaves down at the bottom. Some are going to get burned along the edge of the leaves, so it's just be brown right along the outside edges. Sometimes the leaves will roll, so you'll just see the leaves roll up, and it's almost like a defense to keep the sun from exposing that entire leaf surface to the sun when it's that hot. Obviously, they're going to be more vulnerable to insects. They're going to be more vulnerable to diseases when they're under these types of stresses. This is just kind of where we are, right? When you get temperatures outside the range of that, again, 59 to 86 being ideal, probably 55 to 95 being okay, and then above those temperatures, really starting to struggle and really seeing some of the signs. But again, it's going to be different in all plants. Things like hydrangea paniculatas will just start. I've seen them shed every leaf. They'll just decide one day just to shed every leaf. They're not dead. They just went into a dormancy. They went, okay, I'm out. I'm checking out for a while. And sometimes before fall, they'll try to put some of that growth back on, or maybe not. But as long as they're still bendable, that's fine. You'll see azaleas, thin. You'll see gardenias thin. You'll see fibrous root plants really take it the toughest. And that can be things like blueberries, azaleas, anything with super fibrous root systems, especially root systems that are up in the top 2, 3, 4 inches of the ground, where those fibrous root plants tend to have their roots, established, is up high. They don't have a tap root to reach down and get water. All their water needs are being met right up here in the top 3 or 4 inches, and then they have some sort of relationship with mycorrhizal fungi that supplies them water and nutrients and that kind of thing in exchange for those sugars. All those systems shut down when that plant can't produce sugars properly. So every system begins to shut down, and then they become vulnerable to burning, scalding, leaf drop, diseases, insects, all those kinds of things is what you're seeing. Most plants will recover. Conifers tend to recover more slowly, and some not at all. You know, if conifer defoliates completely, you know, needled plants, they tend to recover slower. But your leafy evergreen plants, and especially your deciduous plants, you know, that lose their leaves in the wintertime, those can, most of those can respond easily to just kind of checking out toward the end of summer and then checking back in March or April, you know, as it warms up. Some of the things you'd want to avoid doing during these stressful conditions, one would be fertilizing. We definitely don't want to be fertilizing this time of year. We don't want to be pushing any new growth on them. Again, like I told you, sometimes that fertilizer can do weird things as well. Introducing, you know, into a very hot environment, the fertilizer doesn't do what it was supposed to do, and you're going to try to push growth on a plant that's kind of going into what we would call summer dormancy, and trying to kind of hide itself. So don't fertilize. The other thing you probably don't want to do is be spraying a lot of chemicals. And you know, I don't recommend any chemicals on this channel anyway, but if you are a person who's spraying chemicals, make sure you're reading the bottle, because a lot of these chemicals say do not spray over 90 degrees. And you know, some of these days are 99, 100, and the plants, you know, the plants can be badly burned. And so I've seen a lot of that over the years in the nursery industry, is that, you know, it's very tempting when you have some sort of insect or disease problem to get out there and get on top of it, and then, you know, on a 98-degree day, that's not a great idea. The things you can do, you definitely want your beds mulched well, and so that 2 to 3 inches of mulch barrier that I have down in my garden that went down toward the late spring is holding in some moisture. You know, and whatever watering I'm doing, it's making sure it's collecting that water and it's not running off, you know, off the beds. It's moderating the soil temperature. It's, you know, hopefully keeping out some weeds. Sun's changing on me radically here. Hopefully, you know, there's lots of things. Plus, it's protecting that soil life that I was just talking about, the mycorrhizal fungi, the beneficial bacteria. They're also very vulnerable to these really, really hot days because they're also down in the soil, you know, and so that mulch barrier can be helpful. Plus, that mulch breaking down is always feeding your soil as well. But it's particularly important in the peak of the summer and the peak of the winter, because it moderates temperature. You know, keeps it slightly warmer in the winter and cooler during the summertime. Watering obviously is, you know, going to be key during summer heat stress in a garden, and morning watering is best. But I don't want to say morning watering is best at the expense of you ignoring something that's obviously stressed in the middle of the day. So if you know it's going to be a day that you're going to be watering, it would be best if you could do it at between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. so that the plant actually is in a position that time of day to actually open its leaves up, absorb some of that water through its leaves, and take that water up through its roots and kind of be ready to defend itself during the daylight hours against that sunlight. So in that the heat of the day. So that's the best time. But if a plant's wilting at 2 in the afternoon, I'm not going to wait until 6 a.m. the next day on a 100-degree day. You know, I might, if it was an 85-degree day, stress the plant just a bit. If it was just showing me a little bit of wilt and it was late in the afternoon, I might ignore that. But when it's 100 degrees outside, 95 to 105, I'm not playing with that. You probably need to put some water on it. The other thing you can do is use mist. So, you know, providing some sort of humidity. I would go out, what we would do at the nursery is we would morning irrigate everything that we knew was going to, you know, we were going to water that day, which was pretty much everything on a 100-degree day. We'll water the nursery, and then sometime around maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd go turn the water on for maybe 3 minutes. And it wasn't to water the plants. There was actually enough water in the containers for them to take up the water. What we did was we wet the fabric and the gravel spaces that the plants were growing in, and then that heat of the day evaporated that water and cooled. You get evaporative cooling around the plants, and that humidity was very, very helpful on hot summer days. So I'll take a water hose out and I'll just spray. I'll put my finger over it and just spray out over things on a hot day, my annual borders, perennial borders, all those kinds of things. That evaporation will cool the air around your plants and help lower some of that stress on those really, really hot days. Of course, you can put umbrellas and other pop-up tents and all kinds of things over some plants that are really, really taking it poorly. If you find you're having to do that every summer, then that's probably not an ideal solution for that plant. It probably needs to be in a different place, or maybe not in your landscape. But certainly on a random 100-degree week that you haven't gotten in 8 years, putting an umbrella over something to save it is would be a good idea. But again, if you're having to do it every year or multiple weeks every summer, that may get to the point where you're putting 80% of your effort into 10% of your plants, and you're going to neglect potentially other things in your garden at that point. Obviously, young plants are going to be more vulnerable than established older plants, and so that's definitely something you absolutely need to think about. Is if you're in an area that has seen these kinds of summers year over year over year, places in Texas, places in along the Gulf Coast, where we're seeing these 100-degree weeks where we normally just don't. Maybe we get a couple 100-degree days, but we don't get 100-degree weeks happening. If you're in those areas, you may want to switch most of your planting over to fall and make sure that the more established the plant is before it sees its stress, the better off you're going to be. So if you're doing any major plantings, if you're planting 50 plants in the ground, that may be a good October project in Texas, and not April, because if you do it in April, you're going to be married to those plants in July and August, nearly daily. Those are the things I see in these heat stress situations, and some of the ways that I try to avoid them. Raleigh had a 100-degree day yesterday, in September, and it's just it's highly, highly unusual. My garden is a little more resistant to it because I did a lot of soil prep in that garden to begin with. There's that clay layer down below, which actually holds water pretty well. Then my organic layer that's been breaking down for the last 3.5 years there, and the plants are planted a little close together, and that's preventing some of that evaporation. And then we're doing timely watering in the morning when we're watering, and it's kept that garden pretty resilient to the conditions that it has seen this summer. So some of those best practices, things that I talk about on the channel quite a bit, on my monthly videos, that kind of thing, are probably helpful as well for maintaining your garden going forward. But good luck with everything. Hopefully things in your garden that you guys have been asking questions about that have been thinning or brown or seared looking, or have insect problems and disease problems, hopefully we'll see some of those things start self-correcting as the nighttime temperatures get cooler. Over the course of the winter, make sure everything stays weeded, get everything mulched, fertilize everything lightly in the late winter, and make sure you're watering during the fall months. October tends to be a very, very dry month for us here in most of the Southeast, so make sure you're doing some ongoing watering, and make sure your gardens are the best prepared as they can be for next summer, and hopefully it's just not like this summer. So thank you guys for following along with the channel.